Bruce Lee, an expert in Eastern martial arts, an American and Hong Kong actor, director, producer, screenwriter, and philosopher. He was born on November 27, 1940, in San Francisco, California, USA, into the family of Chinese opera actor Li Hua, Chuan, and a half-Chinese, half-German mother, Grace Lee. Strictly speaking, he was Li Jun Fan, translated from Chinese as Return Again. He was born in San Francisco, and his mother wanted her son to return to America. As the boy grew up, he was given the name Li Yuen Cam, never sitting still. After his first film shoot, he acquired the name Li Su Lung, Little Dragon. However, in the birth certificate issued at a Chinese hospital in San Francisco, the name was Bruce Lee. Not everyone believed that Bruce Lee was actually a boy. Evil spirits were certain that Grace had given birth to a girl. The mother and father spent a lot of effort to confuse them and even gave the child the girlish nickname Little Phoenix. Their first son had died, and they believed they had offended the gods. In China, it is believed that the second child in the family should be a girl, so Grace and Lee adopted a poor girl as their daughter. Later, they had a son named Peter, and then Grace became pregnant again and was anxious because, according to Chinese beliefs, the second son was also in danger. When the newborn Bruce Lee was pierced in the ears, they called him by his girl name, as if they had succeeded in deceiving the evil spirits. Bruce Lee grew up and caused havoc in the entire neighborhood. There was no one else in Hong Kong who could match his mischief. Bruce Lee roamed the city, befriended anyone, snatched apples from street vendors' stalls, and ignored his parents. A grave sin according to traditional Chinese values of respecting elders. However, Bruce Lee's father was no epitome of family virtues either. He was a good actor and a great scoundrel, beloved by friends and women, but he cared little for them. Li Hoxian spent money on anything but his children. By Hong Kong standards, Li was a well-off man. He owned several apartments that he rented out. But the way the family lived would shock a Chicagoan unemployed. They all gathered around a big table to eat, play, and read. The only room where Lee, Grace, their children, grandparents, several servants, and a huge German shepherd slept. A ceiling fan drearily pushing around hot air. Water was supplied to the house once a week for a few hours, and they filled it up in every container they had. The Lee family took showers in a cat-like manner, splashing water on their faces, spraying it around. They had never heard of baths, and the 40-degree heat in Hong Kong was an everyday ordeal. Yet everyone living under that roof firmly believed that such comfort could only be found in the governor's palace, as most Chinese people huddled in tiny, miserable huts. As the children grew up, it was time to educate them. Bruce Lee and his brothers were sent to a Jesuit college. Jesuits had been doing missionary work in China for centuries and knew more about the natives than anyone else, but even they couldn't handle Bruce Lee. Small, skinny, and agile, Bruce Lee couldn't sit still, had no interest in tackling arithmetic or English grammar, and derived immense pleasure only when he managed to bloody someone's nose. His former mentor, Brother Henry, remembered him many years later, assuring that he was an extraordinary child, lively, receptive, and intelligent. He needed to be handled very gently, constantly engaging his imagination. Then he behaved like an angel. However, it seems Brother Henry rarely succeeded in this. After a few years, Bruce Lee was expelled from the Jesuit school. Bruce Lee had an immense desire for self-assertion, and street fights elevated his self-esteem. He was slim, nimble, and absolutely fearless. A fight could be triggered by the slightest thing, such as another boy looking at him the wrong way, breathing in the wrong way, breathing in the wrong manner, spitting in the wrong direction, or not apologizing respectfully enough. Bruce Lee paid no attention to the size or weight of his adversaries, and they beat him up twice a day. While Li Chuan was not an exemplary father, the bruises on his son's face and the perpetually torn clothes irritated him. Grace, who was supposed to fret, washed the bruises and darned the torn shirts, and Lee read Bruce Lee notations every evening. Eventually, he became tired of it. Li Chuan refused to give money to his children on principle, but when Bruce Lee asked him to pay for kung fu lessons, he unexpectedly agreed. He had a faint hope that this misbehavior would come to an end someday. Bruce Lee chose the harsh and aggressive style of Wing Chun. According to legend, it was created by a nun who lived in the 15th century. She invented it while observing a fight between a snake and a crane. The nun taught it to a girl named Yim Wing Chun, who then passed it on to her future husband, who also had students. And so the lineage reached Ip Man, a former police inspector in Nam Hoi who fled to Hong Kong from Mao Zedong's forces. In Hong Kong, Ip Man opened his own school and made a living by turning troublemakers like Bruce Lee into real fighters. Running 5 kilometers and doing hundreds of push-ups, endless strikes on a sandbag, acrobatics, full contact fights where the opponent's fist came crashing down on your unprotected ribs. Training at Ip Man's school forged his body into an impenetrable armor of muscles and taught him nearly flawless combat techniques. Bruce tested these techniques on his classmates, and the results were more than satisfactory. Soon, his parents enrolled him in another school, where it became evident that his training with Ip Man had benefited him. While he didn't become an outstanding student, his senseless mischief, which he used to trouble the Jesuit fathers, significantly decreased. The mischievousness in the young Li vanished, as after each Wing Chun session, every bone in his body ached. Ease came only after 5 years. However, Bruce Lee calmed down considerably. He became the king of the school, always accompanied by a respectful entourage on the streets. After dealing with his classmates, Bruce Lee took on the English boys who were constantly picking fights with the little Chinese kids and often beating them senselessly. The English boys were much larger, and in their schools, they were taught boxing. Still, knee strikes to the chin, headbutts to the nose, and elbows to the ear proved to be devastating surprises for them. One after another, the rulers of the seas ended up in deep knockouts, and with each black eye and broken nose, Bruce Lee's authority grew. Hong Kong well remembered the Opium Wars, the plundered Beijing, and the signs saying dogs in Chinese not allowed that had only recently disappeared from the city's central part. Life smiled at Bruce Lee, and by the age of 18 he felt almost content. When he was very young, his father taught him to dance, and now he won the Hong Kong Cha-Cha Championship and played several child roles in action film. Nobody dared to argue with him on the streets. In his free time from fights and training, Bruce Lee took dance lessons. Now he looked like a dandy, carefully slicked back and greased hair, impeccably pressed black suit. He ironed it himself, not trusting his mother, a narrow tie with a perfectly symmetrical knot. Whether a missionary school student or a vaudeville dancer, he became the ideal target for street hooligans looking to have some fun. Mama's boys were treated harshly on the streets of Hong Kong. Spitting on their polished shoes or pulling on their ties brought some satisfaction to those who did it. However, these cheeky individuals received a dose of the Sao Do, Bruce Lee's favorite strike, where the hardened edge of his palm would crash onto the attacker's throat. One fine day, he used this technique on 3 members of the Hong Kong Triad, 2 of whom ended up in the hospital. The Triad, the oldest of Asian criminal organizations, had been in existence for hundreds of years. Originally formed as a secret society opposing the Manchu conquerors, it eventually shifted its focus to drug trafficking. Its members were bound by a blood oath that demanded absolute loyalty in exchange for protection. If the Triad members were allowed to be beaten on the streets without consequences, the power and prestige of the clan would be worth nothing. Bruce Lee was now marked for death, swift and preferably painful. What saved him, born in San Francisco, was that he was considered a U.S. citizen. His mother gathered his belongings, bought him a ticket on a ship, and sent Bruce to America to stay with acquaintances. Grace Lee, terrified to death, had no idea that she was sending her son towards wealth and fame. 70 years ago, the first batch of Chinese immigrants arrived in the United States. America was rapidly expanding its network of railroads, and for their construction, cheap labor was needed. Impoverished, hardworking, and compliant Asians were a perfect fit for this purpose. The most convincing argument in dealing with them was a powerful right hook. Impoverished peasants from remote Chinese villages, untrained in martial arts, endured such treatment with Confucian patience. Times changed, customs softened, but American Chinese still found themselves relegated to laundries and cheap restaurants. It was in one of them that Bruce Lee found employment. Soon, Bruce Lee became a movie star. It happened somewhat accidentally. Television producer William Dozier was looking for an actor for a role in a new series, and a person who had studied under Bruce happened to be nearby, and the role went to him. Then he got another role, and then they bypassed him for an American actor. Bruce Lee was worried. He thought his film career wasn't taking off, but when he arrived in Hong Kong, his fellow countrymen were ready to carry him on their shoulders. It turned out that back home, he enjoyed tremendous popularity. In his native city, Lee Jun Fan returned as an American movie star and a warrior simultaneously. Bruce Lee tragically passed away after taking a headache tablet just before completing his latest film Game of Death. The autopsy revealed that brain edema was caused by a hypersensitive reaction to the headache tablet. His death was a shock to all of Hong Kong. No one could imagine that this man, who tirelessly perfected his body day and night, could die. After his death, rumors began to spread that he died in the bed of a mistress, but they were never confirmed. Bruce Lee's funeral turned into a city-wide and then all-Asian mourning event. Thousands of friends and fans came to pay their last respects. Later, Bruce Lee's body was transported to Seattle, where his family said their final goodbyes and where he was buried. Even to this day, martial arts enthusiasts visiting Seattle continue to go to Bruce Lee's grave to pay their respects. His last film was completed 5 years later using stand-ins and became a huge success, sparking a new wave of interest in kung fu and Eastern martial art.